All right, so why would you pay a lot of money for a really high performance, long lasting blade when you can get the same high performance and durability for a lot cheaper cost? Can you? That's the real question. So that's exactly what we're here to find out today. We're going to be testing reciprocating saw blades from Harbor Freight. And as most people know, Harbor Freight is where you go to get, cheap stuff, right? Whether it's cheap in price, cheap in performance, whatever, that's exactly the details that we're going to find out today. So today we have lined up 3 reciprocating saw blades that are sold at our local Harbor Freight. That's the Warrior blade. This is a bimetal blade. Then we also have the Bauer bimetal blade, and this is what they call performance or high performance heavy duty guaranteed, right? And then we got the Hercules blade, which is their top tier blade, and this is a carbide tooth blade. So we're going to be going over these 3 blades, test them and see how they stand up or stack up against other reciprocating saw blades we've tested so far. So you don't want to miss this. Stick with us. All right, so let's take a closer look at some of these blades. This right here is the Warrior blade. It's 6 TPI. It's a bimetal blade, and it's designed for wood with nails. It's a no frills blade pattern. It's pretty straightforward. The edges here are really sharp, and that's pretty much what does the cutting through the material. It's tapered off, a good bit, and looks pretty much like a standard blade. It does come in a 5-pack, as you see here. It's best for wood with nails, teeth stay sharper longer, all this kind of stuff. Thick curved design, universal shank, which pretty much almost all of these are nowadays. And just in case you're wondering where it was created, it's made in China. Okay. This blade, on my receipt, it says about $8.99. I think that's about right across, the Harbor Freight website, but that's pretty much how this blade is sold, all right? Moving on to the Bauer blade here. So if you look at this Bauer blade, it's heavy duty guaranteed. Bauer, wood with nails, sign on here, even 5 TPI, 9-inch, and it's bimetal. This blade profile may look pretty similar, mainly because this blade profile very much resembles what you would refer to as the Milwaukee Ax, and we'll bring that up here in a little bit. But there's pretty much nothing special, or looks like, these edges are really sharp, just like most bimetal teeth blades are, because that's exactly how the material is cut, okay? So this is the Bauer packaging. It comes in a 4-pack. It says claims 3 times the life, full kerf, wood with nails, ultra hard edge cutting, right? 3 times the life. This is a 4-pack bimetal teeth, and on my receipt it said this thing was about $10.99. all right, just in case you are wondering where this was manufactured, this is manufactured in China. Okay, so 4-pack for $10.99. Not too bad of a price. One thing I will tell you right now, it does say full kerf, but one thing I noticed immediately when we picked this up is this blade is pretty thick and it is pretty heavy, okay, as you would expect with something with full kerf. Okay, so just note that this is a pretty hefty blade. All right, then moving on to the Hercules here. This is the Hercules Carbide teeth blade. Hercules C2 Carbide, designed for wood with nails, 9-inch, 6 TPI. Okay, and if you look at the back side, nothing frills going on there. And if you look at pretty much the teeth design, there's no variability. It's all straight up. The teeth offset is pretty normal, as you would expect for a blade like this. This teeth offset is a little bit aggressive, as you can see right here. Just look at how offset the teeth are in terms of aggressiveness. And this Warrior blade is pretty standard. You're really not getting too frills or anything with that. But with the Hercules, you are getting carbide teeth stay sharper longer. So flex, kerf, shatter resistant, non-stick coating, 6 TPI, C2 carbide, wood with nails, and this claims up to 10 times the life. Fast cut designs, cuts through nails. Okay, this is a 2-pack, and it costs on my receipt $19.99. And with Hercules, you obviously get legendary performance. And this blade is professionally made in China for Hercules tools. So as you mentioned here, this Bauer blade kind of resembles the Milwaukee Ax. So let's bring the Milwaukee Ax up in here, and this is what the Milwaukee Ax blade here looks like. So if you look at it, the design is very similar. Most of this part here is pretty similar across all the blades, but even if you look at the coloring, it's pretty similar. Tapered edge here is pretty similar. This one here doesn't really have the fang tip like the Ax does, so that may be a little bit different. But if you look at the design of each tooth, it's very similar, okay? One thing I'll tell you, knowing, just by picking it up, They're both 5 TPI, but this one is significantly heavier than this one. It's a noticeable difference, okay? And that's something you may or may not see. If you look at the thinness of it, or the thickness of it, so to say, so this Milwaukee one is the one on the bottom, and the Bauer is the one up top. The Bauer one here is obviously significantly thicker than this Milwaukee one, okay? So if you want to go look at the teeth offset, let's go take a look at that. The teeth offset should be very similar. Let's see if we can line these up here. If you line it up right here, you can see the teeth are almost exactly the same shape. But if you look at it this way, kind of gives you a little bit better idea between the teeth. The gusset design looks also similar. But if you look at it exactly like this, you can say, wow, there's a lot of similarities in these two blades, right? So, you know, there's that. The other thing to talk about here is this Hercules blade. And this Hercules blade kind of resembles a few blades we've tested so far. You know, we've obviously tested the DeWalt blade. I can't seem to figure out where in the world that is. But here is the Lenox Carbide blade. And the teeth here kind of resemble the same shape and design of this Lenox blade, right? So if you just overlay it here real quick, you kind of see the teeth design is very similar. If not the same. The one thing I'll tell you that is very different is Hercules, or Harbor Freight, or whoever, has pretty much found a way to save a little bit of money here by taking this part of the blade and not putting any teeth or carbide on it, right? Obviously that, you know, that'll save you some money. And as you can see on this blade, even with the shoe all the way back in or retracted in, you're still not using this part. So this part of the blade on most Recip saws, at least the ones that I have, isn't really ever utilized. And Hercules obviously figured that out and said, let's not put anything there. So that's a little bit of a way of saving some money. You know, I'm sure, you know, what is that? Maybe like 3/4 of an inch of, you know, non-teeth carbide, then you're probably saving a good bit of money. So there's that. If you want to look at the teeth, you know, pretty much side by side, neck and neck, you can tell these two blades are obviously not identical, right? Only thing really close to it is really the shape of the teeth, okay? So let's go take a look at what everybody really wants to know. How does it perform? check. All right, so let's go take a look at the damage done. Okay, so this right here is the Warrior Blade. As you can see right here, as we mentioned earlier, this part of the blade never really gets used. And as you can see right here, the teeth here are all pretty much there. The one thing we mentioned with these bimetal blades is the sharpness, like the end point of these teeth is what actually does the cutting. And as you can see right there, a lot of these edges here have been rounded off. As you see right here, it's pretty rounded off. Rounded off, and some of them are maintained sharp, but you know, most of them, when they hit a hard metal like a drywall screw, they will be rounded off. So here is a brand new blade, in case you wanted to look at it right next to each other, but you will see, you know, the teeth rounded off. It's easier to see in this pattern because you got a white contrasting background. Rounded off. This blade didn't get too far, didn't get too much damage. All right, so moving on to the Bauer. So here's the Bauer that's obviously been used. This right here, you know, you can see the sharpness rounded off a little bit. Good way to see it is, you know, it's rounded off. The other thing to note on this is, as you can see, the coating on this blade is actually really thick. You can kind of tell just by, you know, the wear pattern on this. You can see that the coating on here, or the paint, isn't necessarily completely gone as in this Warrior blade, right? It's still stuck on there. It's just kind of gummed up a little bit. So that's one thing to note. Another way, if you want to look at it from this angle, these teeth right here rounded off a good bit of damage. If you want to compare it to a brand new blade, this is what the brand new blade looks like, and you can look at the teeth. You can see really obvious right here, these teeth are perfectly rounded off, okay? If you want to look at it this way, another good way to look at it, but if you really want to see it, you probably want to look at it this way. There you can really see the damage done to these teeth, right? So bimetal blade, that's what you get. Let's go take a look at this Carbide blade here. This Carbide blade, you can tell, has maintained all of the carbide on each tooth. There is a little bit of carbide missing from this tooth right here. Not sure if it's gonna come out too well on video, but you know, that's been chipped a little bit. Most of the carbide is still here. Some of the carbide right here, like this edge right here, may be like it's rounded off a little bit, or maybe it is chipped, who knows. Without a microscope, it's kind of hard to tell. But as you mentioned earlier, this part of the blade never really gets used. So that's one design thing that Hercules has figured out. So let's take a look at a brand new blade, and this is what the brand new blade looks like. And if you want to overlay or look at it this way, you can see a lot of the teeth have a little bit of damage, but you know, it's still mostly enough there that you could probably get a few more cuts out of it depending on what you're cutting, okay? So if you want to look at it in terms of this way, which is probably the best way to look at it, you can tell some of these teeth, good bit of damage. You can tell this tooth right here, flattened out, not necessarily rounded, but more like flattened out or chipped. I'm sure if you looked at it under a microscope, you'll see some of the carbide bits are just missing, okay? So that's what that looks like. If you want to look at what that looks like compared to a worn Lenox blade, the worn Lenox blade, actually, if you look at it, has, you know, pretty much very similar wear. The teeth design or the teeth wear has been very similar, right? But the teeth shape is very similar, so that's something that you would expect, okay? So with that being said, let's go take a look at the numbers. All right, so let's go take a look at the recap of the performance and see what the performance says, okay? So first we tested the Warrior blade, which is a bimetal blade in our standard setup that we do with all the blades that we've tested so far, and it cut through the 16D framing nails just fine. And actually, you know, actually surprised that it made it through there just fine. But all 3 runs average came in at 35.21 on average, 36 nails, not a problem. Then we moved on to the drywall screws, which are incredibly hard. And then after the first screw was technically cut, it failed, right? So just remind everybody, we pretty much consider failure at like the first smoking point. It's just not making a lot of progress. In order for it to be smoking, you're gonna have to be there for a while. So, you know, it may go a little bit further with a little bit more effort or encouragement, but we're calling smoke point as failure, okay? So cut 1 drywall screw there, and if we're being nice, and then so total number of fasteners cut about 37, okay? So moving on to the heavy duty guaranteed, right? So let's talk about what guarantee we're going to be getting there. So with the Bauer blade, first 3 runs of the 16D framing nails, average of around 17.12. All three runs just fine, cut all 36 just fine, okay? So moving on to the drywall screws. On the drywall screw test, it actually failed on the first run after cutting 3 screws. So it's, yeah, cut a little bit more than the Warrior blade, but not all the way through, okay? So with 3 screws and 3 nails, failed after about 39 fasteners cut, okay? So now let's talk about the ultra legendary performance, okay? So then we moved on to test the Hercules blade, which is a carbide tooth blade, so it's kind of unfair. But with the carbide teeth blade, it ran all 3 runs of the 16D framing nails just fine. Average of 3 runs came in at 33.70, and then we moved on to the drywall screws. So drywall screws, first run 42.52, second run 46.55, and the third run 55.90. One thing you kind of took away from there is averagely, you know, pretty much got slower or after each run. So average of 3 runs came in at 48.32 seconds, right? And it didn't actually fail, so the total number of screws before failure, not sure, right? But it did cut all 72, okay? So one thing we did, as we did, you know, some of the other blades that you kind of make it through here was, you know, does it do better if we just add more pressure with the Hercules blade, since it's, you know, it's still cutting fine, it just takes a long time. So what we did was we took, we just added a bunch of user pressure, rocking it back and forth, but still using the same part of the blade. And with those 2 pressurized tests, the first run was 25.42 and the second run was 26.28. So yes, it does a lot better if you rock it back and forth and just adds a bunch of pressure, but you know, you're having a lot of user input to do that. All right, so with that being said, let's take a look at where they stack up on the leaderboard. The Warrior blade, the bimetal blade from Harbor Freight with 37 fasteners cut, puts it in second to last place, right behind the Spider, but right in front of the DeWalt. The Spider is also a bimetal blade with cobalt, but they both cut 37. But the Warrior actually cut it in 35 seconds on average. Or 35 seconds on average, yes, and the Spider was about 16 seconds on average, okay? So the Spider was just a little bit faster, actually a lot faster if you think about it, about 2 times faster, so that's kind of why they both cut 37, but Spider is ranked a little bit higher. Moving on to the Bauer Heavy Duty Guaranteed. So the Bauer Heavy Duty Guaranteed blade, bimetal blade, cut about 39 fasteners, and same as the Milwaukee Wrecker, which cut about 39 fasteners. So they're right around like 12th place. But the Bauer actually got the job done in about 17.42 seconds on average, whereas the Wrecker took about 22.39 seconds on average, okay? You know, it's not super critical right now, but let's take a look at where it stands compared to the Ax blade, because the Ax bimetal blade, you know, has a very similar resemblance to that. So the Ax bimetal blade cut around 41 fasteners on average, so it's, you know, a lot higher on the leaderboard. That's also a bimetal blade. Yes, they do make a carbide tip blade, but that's not the one we're talking about right now, okay? It's on the leaderboard. Just take a look. Then let's move on to the legendary performance provided by the Hercules blade, and that kind of tells a little bit different story than we've talking about so far. So the Hercules blade had a total of 72 fasteners cut. So that puts it right now in 3rd place, right pretty much at the top tier of carbide blades, besides the one that, you know, obviously just destroyed the competition. So it's in 3rd place right now, right after the Milwaukee Wrecker carbide, but in front of the Lenox carbide. So we'll talk about the Diablo and Milwaukee first two runners in a second, but the Lenox Demolition CT 956 CT Carbide blade, which is, the same type of blade we kind of looked at close and close. That one also cut 72 fasteners, but on the drywall screws, it took roughly on average 129.54 seconds, okay, which is significantly longer than the Hercules Harbor Freight blade, which was about 48.32 seconds on average, okay? So yes, they both lasted, but the Hercules definitely got the job done a little bit faster, okay? If you want to take a look at where does that stand with, let's talk about the Milwaukee Ax Carbide, which is about 70 fasteners cut. So it cut about 70-ish fasteners, the drywall screws, but it took an average of around 33.07 seconds, right, on the drywall screw test, which is, a little bit faster than what we have with the Hercules carbide tooth blade. But for the Milwaukee Ax, it actually started smoking up and eventually got through it eventually, but it just had a hard time getting through there, okay? So let's go talk about the entire leaderboard now with the carbide teeth blade. So if you look at the leaderboard, obviously the first two are the Diablo and the Milwaukee. They both cut 156 plus fasteners, and most of them are drywall screws. And they're actually obviously the top two runners on the leaderboard. So if you look at the average of the drywall screw test, the Diablo Demo Demon had an average of 31.19, and then the Milwaukee Record had 34.93. So those two both are still significantly faster than the Hercules Harbor Freight blade, but because they were also faster and relatively easier to use and cut, we did run additional 7 runs with that, and that's kind of how we got to that point. So we could probably eventually run additional runs with this carbide tooth blade Hercules, and we'll see how that goes. But right now, for now, it's took almost a minute to get the last run, and we're just like, okay, that's just a lot of time. Ain't nobody got time for this. So with that being said, let's go take a look at the recap, right? What can we say about these blades? The Warrior blade, obviously, it is not a Warrior, and you should not buy this blade unless you do not want to be the Warrior on the job site. The Bauer Heavy Duty Guaranteed blade, so Heavy Duty Guaranteed, that blade, I think, is a pretty good blade, especially, if you're only cutting soft wood or only wood with nails, right? So if you look at the Bauer Harbor Freight blade, it costs around $2.75, right? $2.75 on average per blade. So if you're doing a lot of demo and you're only going to run into nails or soft material, let's say, right, then it's probably not a bad blade to get, okay? The one thing I will say I noticed immediately as soon as I chucked it in and started using it, there is a lot of, because it's so heavy, there's a lot of recoil and a lot of movement, and you feel a lot of vibration. And that's one of the things I also did notice. I'm not sure if you noticed it, but there's so much recoil, I kind of had to hold the jaw horse down so it wasn't just vibrating off somewhere. So, that's probably a blade I would not buy again, mainly just because the feel of the blade isn't very good. I think the main reason for that is because it's a full cut blade. There's a lot of mass in motion, and that's probably why that is. So even though it's a $2, let's say about $3 blade, and it does pretty well, I would probably not go buy that blade again. So let's go take a look at what we can say about the Hercules blade, okay? So the Hercules blade is probably, I think, the most expensive Recip blade at Harbor Freight, because for $20 you get 2 of these blades, okay? So with the $10 blade, what else can you get? Let's go take a look at Leaderboard. You could get the Diablo Demo Demon, which is the carbide tooth blade. The Wrecker is maybe about $13, so it's just a little bit more expensive. The Lenox is about $10, and those are in big box store wise. They're only really sold at Lowe's. And the Milwaukee Ax blade is also about $10, and we also already know how that did. So would I go out and buy this blade again? That's a hard question, right? So usually Harbor Freight, I really have to go way out of my way to go get. So I would probably not go buy that, because I could easily just walk into the depot down the store or down the road from the house, or usually wherever it is that we're working. There's usually a depot close enough by. We can probably go get that. So I would, if I had a choice, if I was literally picking any, meeny, miny, or one of the two, I would probably just pick the Diablo Demo Demon, mainly because they have an established reputation and track record of producing high performance blades that last a long time at a pretty reasonable cost, right? So it's pretty much the same. And as we mentioned earlier, in some stores, most of the time I've been able to see, you buy one get one free, so you can kind of get 2 blades for the price of one. Kind of brings it down to $5. But if you're in a pinch and you had an option to get this, you can't go wrong. I'll probably go out and get it again, right? So just telling you the options of choice are that logic, okay? It's a pretty good blade, seems to work pretty well. I don't know about 10 times the life, right? Maybe 10 times the life of some bimetal blades, you know, but not 10 times the life of the competition, okay? So what can we say? That's all that is, right? So obviously Harbor Freight did not sponsor this video. They're not involved with us. We have no relationship with them. We obviously went out and got this stuff with our own monies. But, you know, a lot of people are like, you know, you can get a lot of cheap stuff at Harbor Freight. Yes, you can. And most of the time, a lot of the cheap stuff you're getting is pretty cheap. So sometimes, you know, they're saying you get what you pay for, and sometimes that actually is the case. So we don't shop there all the time, but you know, we did, like I said, had to go out of our way to get it. So hope we helped the guys out, and you can determine if you want to go buy some of these blades or not. Otherwise, have a great day, get back to work, and we'll see you guys next time.